Hello and welcome to Encore. My guest today is Damian Barr, author of the memoir Maggie and Me, and now the novel You Will Be Safe Here. Thanks for joining us, Damian.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we talk more about the book, I want to focus on the voices that really form the centre of it. That of 16-year-old Willem in 2010 and Sarah van der Wit. She's a South African woman in 1901 during the Second Boer War. Now, let's start with her. Her diary entries, her voice is rendered by you in your writing very vividly, but also now thanks to your publisher who supplied us with this snippet of Sarah's account. Let's take a listen.
Day by day, farm by farm, the English drew closer. Even on Christmas morning, we woke to smoke spooling across the sky like wool waiting to be wound. It cleared as you said prayers and we sat down to lunch. I still worry that pork was dry. The Creoles are only 6 miles east, and when their big red barn goes up, the barn it took 20 men a winter to build, it'll be us next.
Now we hear Sarah talking about the encroachment of the British colonial troops there, the scorched earth policy that targeted Dutch descendants or Boers and their farms. How did you create Sarah's story? What sort of research did that involve?
Well, I spent 5 years on the novel, and I spent some time in South Africa at the Boer War Museum, and they have a great number of records, letters, diaries from women at the time. And also a British woman called Emily Hobhouse, who travelled to South Africa from England. Very few people know about her. She was great friends with the suffragettes and the suffragists, and she was very brave, and she went there and she saw the conditions that women and children were living in these 49 white camps and the black camps too. And she was appalled by what she saw. And so she interviewed the women about the farms being burnt and about the conditions in the camps. And it's really thanks to the heroism of Emily Hobhouse that we know about these places at all.
Indeed. And now the Boer War, and this in this case the Second Boer War, is not a very well-known aspect of British colonial history. I mean, I certainly didn't learn about it in school. I think your novel will prompt some people to question what they know about it, what they thought they knew about it. There's been a more general reconsideration of colonial history. Recently, I was thinking of the Amritsar massacre that was 100 years ago this year. Why do you think this soul-searching is happening now?
I think Britain is really having to reconsider its place in the world. I think we're paralysed by Brexit, and I think that we're looking back at how we were, and lots of people idealise the role of Britain in empire and the role of empire around the world. And actually, when you start to look below the surface at the conventional narrative, you begin to see there are lots of hidden histories, there are lots of lost voices. And I really think that Britain as a country can't begin to move forward until we really address our role in history. And very often that's a complicated role, and we're not always the good guys.
Well, you do certainly see the links between history and the present day, the consequences in your novel. And because I mentioned there's a second narrative in this book, and that is of Willem, a young man of 16 who is, let's say, a bit of an outsider.
Yeah.
His is a troubling story, really, and it's based on real events, I believe, that you felt compelled to investigate in South Africa. Tell us more.
Yes, so a boy called Raymond Boyce was sent to a camp like the one that Willem is sent to in the novel. He was sent there by his mother and her partner, and within 3 months of arriving at that place, he was dead. His injuries were so horrific, so severe, his own mother didn't recognise him, and the medical staff who treated him had to have therapy for it. So he was sent to this camp which promised to make men out of boys, and these camps exist in South Africa. They're run by former soldiers, and the role that these boys are being trained for supposedly is to work on safari. What they're actually being trained for is to be guards on white farms, and this harks back to the Boer War. These white supremacists now say we must prevent another genocide, we must protect the white people of South Africa, and that's what they're training these boys up to do. But in reality, they're brutal places, and at least 3 boys died in the camp that I went to, and Raymond was the one that made me aware of it. He looked like a boy I'd gone to school with, and I really became emotionally connected to him. I wanted to know who he was. Who was this boy? What was this camp like? And what kind of parent sends their boy to a place like this? And the answers were much, much more complicated than I thought.
Yeah, it is quite a terrifying level of violence that you describe there. And I noticed that that violence also has a slightly homophobic element to it. There is the suggestion that these institutions make men out of boys, which recalls gay conversion therapy in a way in other places. Now, a recent film to tackle that was Boy Erased, starring Nicole Kidman and Russell Crowe. Let's take a look at this short clip.
Your parents signed you up for a program to fix you, but Jared, you are a perfectly normal, very healthy teenage boy.
They're gonna do things for you.
You're a revelation.
You want to say your goodbyes?
Welcome to the refuge program.
You cannot be born a homosexual. This is a lie. It's a choice.
Go. Fake it till you make it. Become the man you are not. Save yourself.
Jared, God will not love you the way that you are.
Is this what you want? Who's gonna strike this demon down?
Now, that film was based on Garrett Connolly's 2016 memoir, and he was sent to one of these centres in the 21st century very recently. What do you think is keeping these homophobic institutions in business today?
Hatred and fear. Hatred of what we don't understand, fear of what we don't know. I met Garrard, I've read that book and I've watched that film, and it's really chilling to see. And we hear these echoes and resonances all the time in our culture of toxic masculinity, which forces men and boys to be a certain way. And at its extreme, in the case of Garrard, and in the case of the boys in my book, involves physical torture, mental torture, sexual torture. But, you used the term earlier, conversion therapy, and I catch myself when I use it because there's nothing therapeutic about it, really. It's a kind of torture. And it happens now, not just in South Africa, not just in America, but it's happening in Europe. It's probably happening somewhere in France. We know that Germany's making moves to outlaw it. But, it's hatred and it's fear. And again, in the way that we have to understand our history, we have to also understand different communities, people who aren't like us. And that goes for religion, that goes for sexuality, that goes for class, which is just not talked about enough. We have to reach out and understand the lived experience of other people. And that's why I wrote this as a novel, because I think that what fiction can do that non-fiction can't do is fiction can take you into a world and ask uncomfortable questions and make you really think and feel in a way that straightforward journalism can make you aware but not necessarily make you feel.
And indeed, looking at the other side of the argument in more liberal, progressive societies, the head of Ofsted, for example, the education authority in the UK, recently suggested that young people should be taught about same-sex relationships in personal and social education. Do you think that will help?
I mean, I think that would be a great help, and we've seen already demonstrations against that from parents who don't want their children to be taught that same-sex relationships exist. But, I mean, who do they think is teaching their children? Gay people are teachers, gay people are working in the school canteen, gay people are working on the grounds, gay people are the parents of these children, gay people are these children. And I think that what we have to understand is that these teachers aren't preaching propaganda, they're preparing children for a real and diverse world. And that's what education is, isn't it? It's making your children ready for the world that they're going to go and live in. And we would be doing our children a disservice if we weren't honest with them about the kind of world that they're going to grow up in.
Indeed. Well, You Will Be Safe Here is your first novel. You've been writing journalistically for years. You wrote a memoir, Maggie and Me, prior to that. This was a shift in tone then. How did you make that change?
I think it crept up on me. I wasn't consciously thinking I'm going to write about, South Africa. I'm going to write a very different kind of story than Maggie and Me, which is personal and a memoir and about, my life. It just evolved over time. I realised that I couldn't answer all the questions that the real life story and the history threw up. And when you can't answer the questions with facts, you have to make it up. And suddenly you're writing a novel. And that's what fiction is. And that is a bit nerve-wracking to begin with. The journalistic bit of me thinks, oh, God, can I make that up? Is it all right to say that? But actually, it is. That's your job as a novelist. But it was hugely enjoyable and challenging. It was really hard. A lot of these stories that I've been writing about, a lot of the material that I've read and the research that I've done took me to some really dark places. But what I found in all of those dark places, without exception, was hope and joy. Because wherever you get people together, you do get cruelty, but you do also get friendship, and you do also get love, and you do also get compassion. And I really wanted to show both those extremes in the book.
Now, as well as writing, you're also the creator of and host of a very popular and very starry literary salon in London, attended by people like Grayson Perry, Amistad Maupin, the late wonderful Diana Athill. You've had access to some great literary minds. What are the best tips you've picked up?
I think to be a reader first of all. I think all writers are readers first, and you have to read as widely and as closely as you can. And I'm really lucky that the salon brings me into contact with some of the best writers and thinkers that we have in the world, really. And I get to ask them honest, candid questions about, their work, their process, how they feel about it. And you realise that writers are real people. Writers aren't gods. I know that in France, writers are revered in a way that they aren't elsewhere. And but writers are people with their own stories and their own motivations, their own prejudices, and their own tricks. And I've been really fortunate to learn some of those from some of those people.
Well, finally, we ask all of our guests to give us a cultural tip. Yes. And you've recommended something that your character, Willem, is also a fan of, and that is Star Trek, in this case, the Discovery Season 2. Why is that?
Well, I've always loved Star Trek. As a child, I loved it, and it's always been a pioneering show. It does go where nobody else goes before. Star Trek was the first TV show to show an interracial kiss, and in the new season, the new show Discovery, we have the first black female lead character in Michael Burnham, and we have a same-sex relationship, the first time ever that we've had a gay relationship in Star Trek. So I find it hugely optimistic and escapist and inspiring, actually, genuinely inspiring.
Okay, maybe you've even persuaded me. Damian Barr, thank you so much for joining us. And do remember, you can check out our website and also keep up with Encore on social media too. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this short clip of Star Trek Discovery.
We're on a collision course with a pulsar.
Oh, what a relief. Thought we were all gonna die.
Wherever our mission takes us, we'll try to have a little fun along the way. Ruffle a few feathers.
I look forward to it.